Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started shortly. We're just gonna wait a minute or two here as people are joining. All right. As you join us, one of my mentors always said, speak early in any meeting so that you can ask questions later and not feel like it's the first time you're talking. So, welcome everyone, and put your name, if you'd like to share your title, position, or where you work. But put your, I guess, actually, no, we know your name. Put where you're from, and if you'd like to share your title or where you work as well, just so that we see. We're always curious how many product managers or product leaders we have here listening in the audience. Awesome. Wow, blood banking. I've not met Kyle. Nice to see you. I've never met a product manager in blood banking, but that is amazing. And hi, Randy. Welcome as well. All right, Tom, I think we can get started.
All right.
Okay, everyone. So we are doing something, I guess, a little different at Productside. We recognize that many product teams right now are involved, very much involved in the planning process for 2025. And so we are bringing a three-part series on just how to think about and create a very strategic product planning series. So the first one is here today, is called Driving Business Outcomes Through Product Planning. But what we're really going to be diving into is how to make product planning truly strategic and how to also think about the go-to-market. So I'm pretty excited for today's conversation. Tom has put together a really, really good session for us all. Okay. Well, with that, Tom, why don't you introduce yourself and why you're dialing in from Stockholm?
Yeah. So Tom Evans, I've been with Productside for over 14 years. I actually live in Austin, Texas, but I am currently in Stockholm working with a client here. So it's exciting to be able to speak from you from Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah, and I see, and I love that everybody is um, writing. We have people coming in here joining us from Ottawa, from Denver, Chicago. Product management truly is it's absolutely global, and so are we at Productside. And nice to see you all. My name is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO. I'm dialing in from very sunny Miami. Right now it's especially sunny, but yeah, excited to be here. Next slide, please. So first, for those of you who do not know us and maybe recognize us a little bit under our former name, 280 Group, we at Productside are an outcome-driven product partner. What that means is we really work with teams and product leaders on helping them transform their organizations, their practices, and up-level across their product people and and best practices. So we offer a complete solution for transformation. We always tailor what we teach to the context for our clients because we find that is extremely important for learning. And all of our engagements are led by our invested experts like Tom Evans here. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, our webinars are meant for you. That means please do not make Tom and I speak by ourselves the entire time. Ask questions, engage with us. If you have a burning question and it's related to the material that we are presenting, we'll actually answer it right then and there, but we also will leave time for Q&A at the end. And right now I will answer the most common question, and I think we already got that, is will this be shared? So all attendees, and if you're listening to this as a registrant, will have a recording of the webinar after it is over. I do not believe we share slides, but you are more than welcome to pause and take screenshots if you find it valuable. We also encourage you to join our LinkedIn group. We have over 65,000 LinkedIn members in our Productside product community on LinkedIn. And there are great posts every single day. So this is a fantastic way to network with your peers and learn product management practices. So I think we just shared a link to join our LinkedIn group as well. And feel free to follow us as well. Tom and I also post independently on LinkedIn as well. All right, Tom, kicking it over to you.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you once again to everyone who's attending. And what we want to do is to talk you through the product planning process. First of all, why does it really matter? We'll walk you through a framework on how you can approach that, and then highlight the benefits of product planning. And so, first of all, we're going to kick off with a poll. So, Kimberly, I think you're going to launch that poll. So the poll here is, which type of regular planning and reviews do you do? And there's 4 options on there. So market analysis, product strategy, product goals and outcomes, feature updates and a roadmap, and program increments or sprint planning. And you can multi-select. So if you want to select more than one, please feel free to do that.
All right. This is actually very interesting, Tom. We rarely do these multi-select polls,
Mhm.
but what's cool about this is, why am I not surprised that program increments and sprint planning is taking the lead here?
I'm not either.
Yeah. So, all right. I think we got just about good number answering. I'm going to end the poll and share results. So we have actually at least over half of respondents have marked all of these. So market analysis and product strategy, 50%, about 2/3 do the product goals and outcomes, and 83% do program increment sprint planning. So not surprised.
Yeah, no, that's typically when we speak to product managers, that's where they're spending most of their time, is looking at program increment, sprint planning. And so one of the questions, of course, I think that brings up is, how do you know that you're doing the right thing in that if you aren't spending enough time up in the market analysis and strategy? And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So have you closed that out?
Yes.
Okay, so let us move on here into the very first slide. So if we look at the role of product management and the activities that we're involved in and reflect upon this within the Productside blueprint, one of the things I want to highlight is, when I speak to product managers and I do training classes and consulting type work, one of the things that I identify very consistently is that most product managers are spending the majority of their time in that create phase. So a little bit of the define phase, because they have to do some requirements building, but a lot of it is really spent in the create phase. But go ahead. You look like you
Yeah,
want to
I
say
need to
something.
pause just really quick because not everybody is familiar with the Productside blueprint. And so just very, very high level, investigate here is all about problems. So problem investigation. Defining here is defining the solution. So that's really having a hypothesis that you go and test prior to create or developing the solution. And deliver is more than just about go-to-market. At Productside, we believe go-to-market planning is in create. Deliver is the execution of the go-to-market plan, as well as maximize phase. Essentially, when your product is out and launched, how do you know it's healthy? How do you know it's being successful? So it's a lot of that is also data and analytics and tracking. So I wanted to kind of give everybody
Yeah.
a little bit of that
Excellent.
context.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so within that context, so we as product managers often spend a lot of time in the create phase. And I have actually asked product managers over the years, what is success for you? And I surprisingly will hear, we launched the product on time within the scope. And the point that I really want to make here is, that isn't where success occurs. Success occurs with the product out in the marketplace. But yet, when we look at that, so many organizations are not doing the product planning. They're not looking at the markets on a regular basis. They're not tracking the performance of their products and understanding how it actually is performing against your expectation and objectives, and whether it is really achieving success. And so this is what we're focusing on, is making it really clear that that's where success needs to be. And the product planning helps us in terms of putting together a plan that is going to help us drive that product. And as Rina mentioned, in our former, some of our former frameworks, we talked about that as being maximized. And I love that term because you want to maximize the outcomes that you expect to achieve with a product after you've made that significant investment in it. Now, the other part of this framework is also really important because that work and investigate and early parts of define in terms of validating problems, validating solutions is really the basis for success. And so while we're going to be focused a little bit more in terms of the planning process, all of the work that we do in terms of investigate and define really help drive the decisions that we make in the planning process.
Yeah, Tom, I just want to take a quick second here and say, so one of the other things at Productside is we offer a free team assessment. It's available. I think we can even find a URL and paste it in for the participants here. What Tom is talking about here in terms of his experience is mirrored in what we are finding in the results from the team assessment. So we're still doing the analysis there, but predominantly we're finding that product managers or product leaders assess their team as having pretty decent maturity around the create phase. And it's the other phases that are fairly low. And that is what is creating the ultimate poor results out in market for a lot of product teams.
Okay, excellent. And so let's walk through a product planning process. And if any of us have studied in a business school program or looked at strategic analysis and decision making, this really shouldn't throw any surprises with you. But the starting point of this is understanding the context of where you are. What is going on within the market that you're in? How is your product performing? And making sure that you have a clear understanding of the organizational strategy. And then from that, we can take that context and create our growth strategy. And we'll talk about what I mean by a growth strategy, because I don't think all of us quite think this way when it comes to the growth strategy. Then we'll talk about the defining your outcomes, because those outcomes are really the measurement that help drive you forward in terms of achieving that growth strategy. And then that results in initiatives or other execution, such as creating the product that is supports that strategy and those outcomes. And then ultimately, we want to track against those outcomes to make sure that we're achieving those outcomes, that we're achieving that strategy, and if necessary, make any adjustments. And those adjustments can be all the way back to our strategy. It can be about our outcomes, or it can be around our initiatives and execution. So let's go and look at each one of these in more detail. So the first one is market analysis. And so these are some of the areas that you will want to have a clear understanding on when you do market analysis. So looking at market trends and industry dynamics, some of the tools that we have found to be very useful in understanding market trends, probably my favorite there is the PEST analysis or PESTEL analysis, because it is a way to help you start identifying key factors that impact what is going on within our marketplace. And so that will be definitely one of the tools I want to look at. The industry dynamic, sometimes because of dynamics going on there, Porter's Five Forces is one that I always learned over and over again when I was in business school. And here, years later, as a product management consultant, I see the practicality and actually looking at that and understanding who the players are, where the forces in the market are, influence your profitability of the products and the attractiveness of the industries that you're in. We want to know what our competitors are doing. So I would say we don't want to over-index on our competitors in terms of, oh, our competitors are doing this, we should do that too. But we do want to keep a lens on them so that we understand where they're strong, we understand where the weaknesses are, and that will help influence the strategy, the growth strategy that we put in place. And of course, finally is market sizing and understanding not just the sizing, but also the growth of particular market segments. And one of the ways that we would typically look at that is the breakdown from a TAM to a SAM to a SOM, or if you're not familiar with those terminology, total available market, serviceable available market, and then serviceable obtainable market are those. And that gives us a pretty good estimate of where that market size is, and then also understanding where that growth potential. So that's a excellent starting point. And first thinking about where those growth opportunities are going to be and which market segments will be most attractive to you and for your product. The second thing that we want to make sure that we do is a product performance review. And so looking at a past period, whether you're looking at that on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, or even a faster basis if your markets have a high level of dynamics to them. And I just show some examples here, but you're looking at goals that relate to the product, to your marketing, to your pricing, to everything that impacts your growth strategy. And so your growth strategy ultimately will identify what are those KPIs that we need to be looking at and comparing to in terms of understanding the performance of our product against that growth strategy. And I want to be clear, when I say product performance, many people interpret that and say, oh, how is the product technically performing?
Mhm.
Well, yes, that's part of it, but I'm really talking about commercially, how are you performing? So how is it performing against your commercial expectations? And when we have deviations from what our target actually is, we want to make sure that we do a good analysis of why that deviation is occurring. And that deviation can be a negative deviation to where you're not achieving the target. And even if it's a positive deviation where you're succeeding beyond the target, I really should have an understanding of that, because that deviation may have come from market dynamics, or there perhaps were things that actions that we took as an organization that had a much more positive effect than what we expected to. And when that happens, we want to know that. And so that analysis of the performance is even more critical than the tracking of it itself, because then you would be able to leverage that new insight to be thinking about, where can I make changes in my strategy and the execution of that strategy. Finally, and I don't know whether it's finally because all three of these actually go on together, but we want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of our organizational strategy and the outcomes that our organization is expecting to achieve. And so all organizations at least a high level will have some level of strategy in place. Often, and I will ask this in classes, I will ask, do you know what your overall business strategy is? And many times the product managers aren't completely clear on that, but yet that is an important business context that we may have. If you're a larger organization, you may have strategies for specific market segments that somebody in the organization is responsible for. And you want to make sure that you understand those, because your product strategy needs to align to those strategies and those desired outcomes, and make sure that we are supporting those goals and strategies of the organization. Otherwise, we're not really contributing to the organization in the way that we should.
So, Tom, I do want to share that when we do come into organizations that do not currently have a good understanding of a business outcome, as Productside, we developed a guided discussion template that I think we can add to the list of things that we can send to participants. You'll receive a template to help you have that discussion of what is our business outcome with your leadership.
Yeah,
So we have to
exactly.
start there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and that is part of our overall playbook. And so that's an excellent starting point if you don't have that full understanding of that strategy and the expected outcomes.
Yeah, there's a reason it's the first one in the
Yes,
playbook.
absolutely. And it's one of the first things that we talk about in our training class too. So
Yeah.
making sure that they have a clear understanding of that. So what is a growth strategy? One of the terminologies that I've heard used in a book that I read years ago is where they talked about where are you going to play and how are you going to win? Okay. I rephrased that first one a little bit about where can you grow? And to be able to make those decisions, we need to, one, is understand those market segments that are attractive to us. But even within those market segments, we need to understand where the growth potential is. And while you may have some variations on there really are about 5 ways that you can go and grow within a market segment. I was working with a client a few weeks ago, and one of the uh, discussions that we were having is, what does winning mean to you? What does it mean within a particular market segment? And in that particular case, we talked about some of these. And so, for example, increase customer spend. We want to go and move our current customers onto some newer products that we have also. And so they wanted to uh, increase their current customer spend. And so delivering more value, getting your customers to buy more of your product than what you have in the past. That's one potential growth strategy. Taking customers away from the competition. That was another one that they had identified. They had one of their competitors who was weak, was weak in some areas. And so they saw an open opportunity to be able to go and go after some of their current customers to win from the competition. Finding customers that have underserved needs. Now, these may be customers that are within your current market segments, but for whatever reason, they have not yet selected a solution along your line or a product along your line to address those needs. And so that is, if you are in a growing market, is one of the most attractive white spaces for you to be able to go after, because trying to take customers from competition, while long term it may pay off, the short term cost it can be quite high. And so look for where those white spaces are in terms of underserved customers. There may be opportunities to deliver new value to that market segment, and really potentially other market segments, but deliver new value. That is thinking about, we can add new capabilities to our product or new features to the product, or perhaps it's a completely a new value proposition that is associated to your current products. And so that provides an opportunity for growth. And then the final one is to enter into new markets or new segments. And so, for example, some of my customers, they may be really strong in the US market and perhaps European market, but when they do their market analysis, they also look and see Asia is one of the fastest growing markets for that segment that they're currently serving. And so for their one of their strategies of growth might be to be able to start positioning themselves and gaining growth within the Asia market. And so you start to see all 5 of those are ways that we can potentially grow within the market segments that we intend to serve or that we would like to grow into. But it all starts with that market analysis and understanding the attractiveness, and then understanding where those white spaces are within that market segment based upon these, there are really 4 factors, and then the 5th one being new market segments. The final question is, how are you going to win? Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot in our training class is a positioning statement. And a positioning statement is very important because it tells you, where are you going to deliver value and how are you going to deliver value different than your competition? And how is that going to be appealing to your market segment? But just beyond talking about your value proposition, you really want to be thinking about what actions do you need to take that are perhaps directly targeted at a competitor. So in many industries, there are some industries where that competitive strategy is really very strong and very aggressive, and you see companies aggressively attacking their competitors. I think for most of us, we aren't necessarily being aggressive about it, but we are definitely clearly following a plan that is going to help us attack those competitors. So maybe not in a vocal, aggressive way, but clearly we're going against that. And so that's part of what we want to do. It's more than just the position. It's really, how am I going to win against that competition? Now that we have the growth strategy and we made some decisions around which segments and where those growth opportunities are within that market, we need to go and guide are the outcomes that we want to achieve to execute on that strategy. Now, you notice we have in there product outcomes, and I think those of us who are product managers will typically think about the product outcomes. Now, how we define product outcomes within Productside is, how am I delivering value to my customers? So how am I helping my customers do their work or do their job better than what they are currently able to do that? And so if I'm doing new products, I'm looking at big incremental changes in that. If I have an existing product and I'm in that growth phase or maybe even in a maturity phase, sometimes that's going to be incremental improvements, but it's adding additional incremental value for our customers. But what I want us to understand is, it's not just changes to our product that is going to help drive that growth strategy. It is outcomes that we have clearly defined in marketing and working with our channels, whether that's a direct sales channel or a distribution channel, that is going to help support our growth strategy. Now, in some industries, the product managers have a heavy influence in terms of marketing programs and channel programs and driving these marketing outcomes and channel outcomes. But in other industries, you may not have as much direct influence over that. But what you need to do is to be able to clearly get with the leaders of marketing and the leaders of your sales channels or sales teams, and let them understand what your growth strategy is and what you need from them to be able to support that growth strategy, to be able to communicate what's in it for them if we are able to achieve this growth strategy. So this is a collaborative effort that we have to be able to do with our marketing teams and our sales teams or our channel teams to be able to support that growth strategy. And then finally, some of that growth strategy may be around, how do we improve margins? And so sometimes that's improvements in pricing. Other times that may be reduction in product costs, but having a clear stated outcome around that, that may require you to work with a pricing team, that may require you to work with the supply chain team, but other parts of the organization that can help guide and deliver against those targeted outcomes.
Tom, you are coming in a little bit in and out. I can hear you
Okay.
well, but just in case, do you think maybe we should turn off video just to see if that helps with the bandwidth?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's try that.
Overall, my connection has been pretty good,
Yeah,
but
from my
okay.
perspective, I hear you. It's just sometimes you slow down and then sometimes it just speeds up to catch up.
Oh,
So
that has to sound kind of funny. So,
it does
all
sometimes.
right. Sorry you can't see me, but let's focus on the what I'm saying here. So then, once I have clearly identified what those outcomes are across those four areas, well, guess what that drives? That now drives our initiatives. And so one of the things I think we do too often is we jump to the initiatives without really thinking about what are the key outcomes that I want to be able to achieve. And so when I think about these different outcomes, that's going to be your product features or product improvements that we make. Those will be your marketing programs that you work with your marketing team to be able to execute. Any channel execution or channel programs or sales enablement are going to help drive that channel outcomes. And then, of course, as we talked about, working with your pricing teams, working with other parts of the organization to either improve pricing or I should say, improve pricing or improve the cost of goods sold. And so this, you notice we're not just jumping to the initiatives, we're thinking about the strategy, the desired outcomes, and now we're finally getting to the point of where we're defining what those initiatives might be to support that strategy. And then, of course, we want to track against those targeted outcomes, and we want to track against the outcomes from a product perspective, whatever those KPIs are, the margin, the channel effectiveness, the marketing effectiveness. All of those are things that we want to be tracking. Some of that are things that we have to take ownership of tracking. But if I'm not the one who owns the tracking, I want to make it clear with my marketing team, with my sales team, or with my channel team that these are the types of information that I need to be able to get access to evaluate how well we're executing against this product strategy. So if that means I need to get marketing reports on a regular basis, if I need to be able to have access to or at least view reports within our CRM system or in our Salesforce system, those are going to be things that will help you identify how well you're tracking there, because the product improvements are going to be important, and seeing that we're delivering additional value to our customers will be important. But what's actually driving my business still is coming through the marketing and the sales teams. And so seeing how effectively they're executing against that strategy is going to tell me how well I'm on track to achieving my target strategy and the growth outcomes that I want to achieve.
So Tom, so just a question here from me. A lot of companies, yeah, they may not have access, or a lot of product teams may not have access to this kind of data, but I do view this and what we're really talking about as needing a cross-functional team. So this kind of puts together the overall business health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
we spoke a few weeks ago, Kenny and I spoke about pricing strategies and how product doesn't have a seat at the table sometimes when it comes to pricing decisions. But I do find that building something like this, like having a really high level dashboard for the business, is what really gets you a seat at the table. So what would you recommend in terms of what to do with this data? So yes, product team can use it to kind of understand where are we year to date, what are the variances, and what do we do about it. But what other uses are there, do you suggest, if you have this data, to then bring it to what forums or formats?
Well, so to me, it actually really starts with the first part, is that now that I have access to this data, it's going to help me better inform and communicate a compelling growth strategy. And so if all I'm ever talking about is here are the improvements that I'm going to make on my product, and I'm not ever communicating in a broader manner, here's the strategy and here's the opportunities for us to grow. I think if we want to get our marketing and sales partners on board, we need to be able to come to them and say, I've done my evaluation of the market. Here is our market segmentation. Here's where we can grow the most. And so I want to make sure that the product changes that I do, that the marketing programs you execute, that the sales uh, programs that sales execute all are aligned to support that. And that to me is going to be the biggest part of getting them on board. And once you have them on board around that, they should be much more willing to help share that data with you so that you can continue to track the overall health of your product. So I look at it as the starting point really is that strategy. Let me give you an example here. I'm going to give a bit of a long-winded answer, but I was working with a client. It's been a few years ago, but as I was talking to the head of marketing, I asked them a question. I said, what is it that you need from marketing or from product management to better support marketing programs? And they said, if they would come to me with a clear definition of who they want to target, then I'm in a much better position to create the right marketing program. And see my are you hearing me okay? My internet
I think you cut out
is,
just a little bit, but it's overall much better.
yeah, okay. Yeah,
But what
okay.
we heard you
And
say, basically, the marketing manager wants to get certain information, right? Like, who do you want to target and how? And then they can help advise you.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so what I feel like is that in many organizations, there's not an alignment of strategy between the product team
Yeah.
and the marketing team. And the marketing team is taking guesses sometimes at what might be the strategy because it hasn't been clearly communicated. And so if I'm in an organization where I have both product management and product marketing, one of the things that I want product marketing to do is to help communicate, define that strategy and work with the marketing partners and the sales partners to make sure that's clearly understood and why that's an important growth strategy for them.
Right. And I think that's why I was asking the question here is because we do, when we go into organizations, and I hear this all the time, is product marketing and sales are completely out of sync. And
Mm-hmm.
something like this
Mm-hmm.
actually has the benefit of if you can communicate it to that leadership level of
Yes.
here's how we are all aligned. I mean, these metrics that I think that's part of what we're trying to express here is don't just do this in silos, is collaborate and then
Exactly.
also share that information.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to a conversation I had with one of our team members about a year ago. And what we were talking about is you need to make sure that product, that marketing and sales are all fishing in the same pond
Mm-hmm.
and that they're not fishing in different ponds. And by the way, they ought to be going after the same fish within that pond, which means they're using the same bait, et cetera. And so that's where that alignment doesn't often happen because nobody has sat down and clearly said, here's the pond we're fishing in, and here's the type of fish that we're looking for.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about all of these different elements that go into your overall growth strategy. And what I want to do is to share an example, and it's fairly busy, but at least give you a sense of what does this look like. And so, for example, let's say that your organization has a overall strategy of increasing market share within large city transit agencies. Now, they may have done some analysis and say, all right, we believe that we can grow in there because we can take some business away from competitors and there's a segment that is underserved. They may not provide that to you. They may have given it general enough that you yourself, or maybe working with your product leader, are going to have to break that down a little bit more and be able to say, where are some of those white spaces? Where are some of those opportunities for us to grow? And then from there, we build out that overall winning strategy. So how are we going to win in that marketplace through our positioning and going against the competitors? Now I can start defining my product growth outcomes. And you can see I talk about that from a product and a marketing and a sales perspective or a pricing perspective. And I've only given some of the examples. I haven't built this out 100%. And then you finally see that I have the initiatives and features, or the initiatives and execution identified. And you can have multiple layers of this that you will actually build out together. Now, here's the thing that I've seen in organizations, and I'll tell a quick story, is when I was in college and in my undergraduate, I remember that as the professor in a engineering class was handing back our test that he had just scored, he jokingly talked about one of the person's tests, and he says, "You had the initial work here, and then you had an answer over here, and then you drew a line between the two of your initial work, but you didn't show the in between work." And he jokingly called that the line function. And that's what we do as organizations is we have a line function that we draw between, here's a goal that I want to achieve, and we draw a line to the initiatives and features that we want to do, and we never create that connective tissue on how we actually got to that, and to be able to demonstrate how those execution actually aligns to and supports the strategy that we put in place. Because in reality, there is no strategy. We want to get here. Here's what we're going to do that, but we don't have no strategy connecting that together.
Yeah, Tom, I just want to say this is something I think a lot of product managers, especially if you are I guess an individual contributor, you might feel like where's the why behind my work? And it's not
Hmm.
just product, right? Even marketing here, the targeted marketing campaign that will lead directly to more leads from competitors, customers, right? Because marketing might have a lot of campaigns because they know they need to increase the market share, but it might not be it just wouldn't be as targeted. And so the success from that marketing campaign is then hard to
Hmm.
judge. It's the why are we doing this? And so that is
Hmm.
why I think, to your point, the line function, uh, this is a lot of the thinking work that needs to happen
Hmm.
at the organization that sometimes doesn't happen. And not doing it has a lot of costs because you
Yes, it
will have
does.
marketing campaigns, right?
Hmm.
You'll run them, but why?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I could even run a marketing campaign and say that I had great metrics on it. But if
Hmm.
it doesn't contribute to the overall strategy, who cares?
Hmm.
Well, let's go into another poll. And so in this poll, we're going to ask you, which of these do you typically prioritize? And so we talked about these different elements. And so this again is a multi-select. You can select from multiple of them, but there's the business outcome and strategy, the market segments, there's the growth strategies, the product level outcomes, and the initiatives and features.
Yeah, we'll leave this one open for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I'm glad that you all are voting, and it looks like very honestly, because there is definitely improvement. And we know this, right, Tom? We go into organizations, we know a lot of large, great organizations have very smart, amazing people. And everybody needs sometimes a push to realize, hey, this is missing and it's actually costing us not to do it right. So
Hmm.
I'm going to end the poll right now and I'm going to share the results. And look at that. Only one person has typically prioritized growth strategies. So how are we
Hmm.
going to grow? And not surprised at all, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm actually really pleased to see that as many people put in there the prioritization around business outcomes and strategy, because I think that sometimes is a missing gap. And as I talk to product managers in organizations, it's often we have all of these goals of the organization, and it almost feels like I have to do everything to support them. And
Mhm.
I need the organization to prioritize those. So I'm glad to see that much, but it also does indicate that there's probably a bit of a line function going on there, because the intermediate work of thinking about which segments do I want to prioritize, which growth strategies do I want to execute, are probably missing because that's not showing up as part of that prioritization.
Right. To your point, you have the business outcomes and strategy, and you have the initiatives and features, and then how are they all going to
Yep.
get connected
Hmm.
without it? Yeah. But good news,
Exactly.
you can do this work. It is possible.
Exactly. And this is just really kind of building on upon that poll. But the reality is as much as we want to do all of these things that we could potentially create a strategy around and initiatives and features, we can't do all of those. And so we have to prioritize at each levels of those. And I think when we get down to initiatives and features and we try to prioritize there, but we haven't prioritized the rest of that stack very well, that's where organizations struggle. I know that in multiple of the classes that I teach, even before I teach the class, I've had people say, my biggest challenge is prioritizing features. And I love when I hear that, because my first response is, we're going to teach you something different. We're going to teach you where you should start prioritizing, and that's up there at the outcomes and strategy level of it. Then that is going to better inform you in terms of prioritizing those features. And so, yes, we recognize you can't do it all, but if all I'm doing is prioritizing features and initiatives, it's going to feel overwhelming. But once I understand my prioritization around my strategy, then I can do a better job of focusing on the right initiatives and features to support that. And I feel much more comfortable in that prioritization decision that I make. So finally, why do we want to do this? I think we've talked a lot around those benefits already. And I know, Rena, you're talking about getting aligned with other stakeholders and helping align with product development, with marketing, with sales, with the pricing, or all of that is going to help you gain that alignment. The second thing is that if I have a clear strategy in place, then any investment that I want to make, I can clearly line up that investment and show how it's supporting that strategy and it's supporting the business outcomes. And then the final thing is that I feel like too often when I work with organizations, they look at a business case as a rite of passage to move into product development. And what they don't do is once I launch that product is to keep track and say, am I achieving those goals of the business case? The business case has been put on a shelf, gaining dust somewhere and never looked at again. But in reality, we launched that product or we launched an update to it. We want to be tracking to see, are we achieving those goals within that business case? And so by going through a regular product planning process, it's going to help me make sure that I achieve those goals or exceed those goals.
Great.
All right, one last poll here. And so when you look at all of these things that we have been talking about, the question now is, in which of these areas do you need to invest more time? And so market analysis, product strategy, product growth strategy, product level outcomes, initiatives and execution, outcome tracking and adjustment.
Yeah. And as we do that, this is our last poll. We're going to head, because I'm just being cognizant of time, we're going to head
Yep.
straight into questions. The first question, everybody, if you have questions, feel free to use both the Q&A or the chat feature. I'm following both. And we also, for those of you joining LinkedIn Live, ask in there and we'll get those questions. First one comes from LinkedIn Live, Abdul Rahman. I hope I'm saying your name right. How does the stages, I think he's talking about the image with the three and then like what we just discussed, how does that align with the product management life cycle?
Which stages were
Oh,
that?
so what we talked about, organizational market strategy, organizational strategy, product growth strategy, and then the different, I think they're asking like, when do you do this as part
Oh,
of the
okay,
product
absolutely.
management? Yeah.
Yes. And so really at the beginning, if I'm working on a new product, I ought to at least have elements of that growth strategy in place because I want to know who I'm targeting, what my outcomes that I'm trying to achieve are, where I believe we have the best opportunities for success. So that's one area that I would be doing it. But as my product is out in the market, as it's going through the phases of introduction, growth, maturity, and even into decline, this is a execution that I want to perform on a regular basis. So it's, if I look at the product life cycle from that perspective, it is a continuous activity that I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm about to share the results of the poll and I'll talk about those briefly. But as I do that, Tom, can you go back to slide 9 where we show the blueprint?
Oh yeah, okay.
All right. The good news about this poll is it kind of mirrors essentially what we saw at the previous one. I'm glad that the people who say that they're really good at the initiatives and execution are probably not going to focus there as much. And I'm happy to see about 45% or greater are talking about the product growth strategy, which is again where we saw a lot of the biggest gaps.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, great. All right. So we talked a little bit about the product management process, but the point here is in the blueprint, we were very thoughtful about this. We took some time to create this as really to illustrate how product management should be done. And what's been kind of grayed out, I don't know if everybody can see it because it wasn't the focal point of the slide, is the context. So the context is that internal values and strategy, the market environment, and the customer and users. And that really helps inform how the product management team is operating. And so what we're talking about here in terms of product planning, the reason why it is so important is because it's really part of the context and it will help you in terms of how you investigate the problems to be solved, and then also how do you track and deliver value to the organization and to your users. So I think I'm just kind of repeating what Tom mentioned, but I wanted to also bring forth the importance of that context in which the product management team is operating. All right, we have a question here from one of the attendees. Back to the prioritization of features and linking them with the business outcomes and strategy. How would you quantify the causal effect of each link so that they are realistic and accurate? So I think they're asking here is, how do you know that, one, you can derive the feature from the strategy? Could you go to that slide where you show the link? Slide 18.
Yeah. Let me go back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you cut out just a moment on me, and so
Oh, that's
repeat
okay.
that question, please.
So
Yeah.
in terms of prioritizing what's on the right column, how do you make sure that there is actually an effect in terms of the lines that we're drawing here?
Okay.
How do the features get actually derived from the strategy?
Yeah. So one is I'm not sure if I want to say the features get derived from, but as I am making decisions around features, what I want to know is that the features that I'm including are actually supporting the overall strategy. Let me give you another example around that. I was in a airport lounge one time, and somebody next to me was having a conversation over the phone, and not that I was listening in on him, but he kept talking about doing voice of the customer and all that. And after we got done, I started talking to him, and he said, "Yeah, they said, oh, we want to launch these new features." And he asked him, "Well, what business goal or what strategy is that going to help you achieve?"
Yeah.
More important is less about does the strategy actually drive the features, but am I selecting features that help support the strategy?
So, Tom, I'm going to answer that maybe a slightly different way. I might have misunderstood the question, so you can always ask it again. But
Yeah.
when it comes to initiatives and features, there is an element of also guessing, right? So it's not that you know 100% that this targeted marketing campaign is going to grow this number of leads. Some of it is really an experiment and should be thought of
Mm-hmm.
as that. It's a bet you are taking. And so, as much as possible, you are supposed to create initiatives and features that are in support of your strategy, and also do retrospectives and have another way to minimize the risk. Sorry, first is like establish the right hypothesis where that initiative and feature isn't a end all be all, right? It's a small experiment that
Mm-hmm.
should lead to some outcome, and then make sure it does, like have the learning as part of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Just as you were talking about in terms of the product side blueprint, there's that discovery work. And you need to do that discovery work and the discovery work overall, both investigate and define, to see whether that the need is well understood,
yeah.
and also if the solution that you're proposing is going to solve that need. But also you can experiment around, does that contribute to the outcome that we expect to get? So yeah, it's not placing big bets, it's
Yeah.
placing some smaller bets and then making sure that directly you're doing right. And that's why this regular monitoring also is important, because if that small bet I'm making isn't driving the outcome, then I have options available to try something else that will drive that outcome.
I also want to encourage this person to and everybody else to attend. I think it's October 9th. We are going to do a webinar specifically on feature prioritization. So if you're talking about how
Mm-hmm.
do you actually put a number behind it for prioritization, that's the third part of this series. All right, I want to address Randy's question. How frequently do you review your product strategy? The company I am helping looks like this is static, like it's a Oh, I'm sorry, Randy. Tom, how would you answer that question?
Okay, the company they're helping,
It
it looks
looks
like
like
what?
it's
I missed it.
static, like it's a one-time
Got it.
strategy.
So it really depends upon the dynamics of the market that you're in.
Hmm.
But for the most part, I want to look at this at least on an annual basis. And maybe I want to, I'm going to draw a little line here, but if I'm looking over in this area, these aspects of it probably have less dynamics to it. And so these are things that I typically can address on an annual basis, being thinking about that growth strategy, the outcomes, et cetera. When I start looking at the product growth outcomes, some of that will depend upon the dynamics of your market. If I'm in a relatively fast moving market, well, I think in any market, I should be looking at these on a quarterly basis. And if I'm in an especially fast moving market, I know like some of the customers I've worked in telco, they're looking at this on a weekly basis or at least a monthly basis. And so part of it is going to be driven by the dynamics of that market. But I would say annual for the first part of that, and then the other aspects of it, looking at that on more of a quarterly basis. Your initiatives and features, you might be looking at that on a sprint by sprint basis because you're able to get feedback fairly quickly.
Yeah, I'll add to that that it's not just the market that influences this. To Randy's point, it's also the organizational culture. So there is
Hmm.
business model, but there's also what is the learning model at the organization. So some organizations, especially the larger ones, to Tom, your point, they're not going to be able to learn enough information to see whether or not their strategy is working or not working. I think that's why startups, which are smaller, they have a high degree of learning across the organization. And they tend to, in that way, pivot a lot faster.
Exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
But it certainly shouldn't be a one-time strategy. If it's a one-time strategy, that means to me that you're not testing or learning, because that's
Hmm.
why you wouldn't change it. All right. I think that's all we have time for questions. Just really quick, I want to remind everybody about can you keep going to the end? So
Yeah.
first, if you liked some of the content here, as Tom has been saying, we do teach it in our optimal product management class. We actually have a brand new self-study version of our optimal product management class. Excited about it. It was just released just a few weeks ago. So you can study anytime, anywhere at your own pace, and it still comes with the certified product manager exam from AIPMM. I think that's a link to it. We also have a special code. We like to give out codes to our webinar attendees. Prod Plan 250 will get you $250 off any of our courses, including that self-study. The next Optimal Product Management live online class is happening October 1st. I think we're currently running one right now with Ryan. And we also have a new AI product management class. I think Roger's joining, but it's actually going to be taught likely by Dean Peters, who's pictured. And
Yeah.
we have agile and digital as well. So yeah, sorry, that's a typo. Well, Roger will be there.
Yep.
Next one, in terms of the upcoming webinars, is going to be about outcome-based roadmaps. So now that you have strategy, how do you build the roadmap, the strategic communication tool to communicate the strategy and deliver value to your users and your business? That one's happening next Thursday. Yeah, next Thursday. I have to check that. Next Thursday, September 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then the third one is going to be in October. I believe it's October 9th. Follow us on LinkedIn, and also subscribe to our newsletter at productside.com so you can get all notified on our upcoming webinars. And thank you, Kim, also for posting the links. All right, team. Tom, shout out to you. Thank you for dropping some knowledge our way. And thank you all to the participants for joining us for this webinar. Bookmark it next time you're doing your annual planning. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you.